I'm Lauren Southern with the Rebel Media here in Delhi, where the World Health Organization is having a conference about tobacco and e-cig regulations. And off to the side, outside of the conference, experts have gathered in this meeting hall to discuss their opposition to some of the regulations on e-cigarettes that the World Health Organization has proposed. The World Health Organization wants to restrict sales, restrict advertising, and even flavors of e-cigarettes to deter usage of them. Whereas the experts, doctors, and people who have made the statistics and studies on e-cigarettes are saying this product could save millions of lives. Why are you trying to deter usage? So even though these are the experts, the World Health Organization has not asked them to come and speak and contribute their voice. Instead, a bunch of politicians and bureaucrats are deciding the future of e-cigarette control with hardly the advice they need or the opposite opinion being given. It's a very scary prospect. So let's listen to what the experts have to say about that. I'm Lauren Southern with the Rebel Media, here talking to Dr. Constantino Farsellino, and he has been researching tobacco and e-cigarettes. Can you give us a little bit of history on how you got into this and why you got into it?
Well, basically, the way I got into it was a coincidence. And it was a coincidence of having two very close friends who one day sent me a picture of themselves using an electronic cigarette. That was 2011. And I had no idea. I knew that the cigarettes existed, but I had no idea of how they work, what they really are, and how they function. But seeing them, they were smokers, and trying this cigarette, my initial impression was that they just wasted their time and money for something which is useless. But they kept on, teasing me, basically. That's what happened. And that generated the interest to do some research because I had already done some research on smoking. And basically my first study was a replication of a study that I had done a few months ago before on smoking. And that's how I started, my contact with the e-cigarette community, first of all, because to be educated, I looked for vapers, for consumers. And I found an internet forum of consumers. And that was my first interaction with the e-cigarette and with the e-cigarette users community.
Now, when vaping is promoted as an alternative to smoking, I hear quite a bit that vaping shouldn't be touched because we don't know much about it. It's scary. In fact, all the chemicals in it could be more harmful than tobacco. Is this a misconception?
We have very strong evidence about the risk difference between smoking and electronic cigarette use. And it's very strong. Of course, it's not coming from epidemiological studies because it's too early. But this is, I think, a misuse of an argument about research. Of course, we need more research for everything in our daily lives. But to use this argument as an excuse or a justification for severe restrictions or even a ban is wrong for a simple reason. There has never been a product in the history of humanity, including pharmaceutical products, that were allowed to be marketed after research on humans for 10 or 20 years. None. None ever in the history. What we do even with medication, with pharmaceuticals, is what we call post-marketing surveillance. So we have some evidence, of course, laboratory studies, but clinical studies are usually done for 1 or 2 years. Then we release the product into the market, if from the data we see that it's safe, and then we monitor the use in the population for long term. And that's how we generate all the information about the long-term use. So yes, I would agree that we will need eventually long-term use, but that's not an excuse to apply restrictions or a ban.
If everyone who has recently started using cigarettes switched to e-cigarettes, how many lives do you think we could save in the next 50 years?
Over the long term, we're talking about millions of lives saved. Of course, you need to understand that even smokers who quit without even using an alternative, the risk reduction is not immediate. You need to have several years of quitting before you get to a point of a risk which is almost similar, a bit higher, but only slightly higher than someone who has never smoked before. But the level of risk reduction in general doesn't happen from one day to the next. So the more you have smoked in your life, the longer the risk is going to be maintained, even if you quit without using anything. But over the 50 years period, as you said, we are going to see millions, literally millions of people saved just because they decided to switch from smoking to e-cigarette use.
Do you have any fears about the regulations being proposed towards e-cigarettes at the World Health Organization meeting going on here in Delhi right now?
Yes, I have significant worries about the whole approach to the issue of harm reduction in electronic cigarettes. You know that within the tobacco control definition, the WHO accepts the principles of harm reduction. It is mentioned if you see the definition of the tobacco control according to the WHO. But unfortunately, the whole stance and the approach towards this issue is strongly negative, and it is, there are a lot of concerns, which of course everyone has, but there is a denial about the evidence that we currently have, and we have a lot of evidence. We will never be 100% certain because we're never 100% certain about anything. And of course we cannot predict what's going to happen in the next years, but that's the reason why we need the research. But it cannot be used as a reason to apply restrictions. Restrictions or the regulation in general and the approach will depend on what is happening today. And today, we have not witnessed any country where the use and the availability of e-cigarettes had any negative consequence on a population level. So based on this very simple fact, I don't understand why we are still so very reluctant, the WHO and several authorities, in allowing smokers have an additional tool where when they cannot quit or they don't want to quit with the use of the other alternative methods.
Would you consider the 180 parties currently bringing back these legislations to their countries and voting on them, would you consider them experts in the topic or at least being advised by experts?
Well, that is what we ideally should happen. They should have engaged the experts. Of course, they are politicians, they are regulators, many of them, so they don't have any scientific background on the terms of safety, assessing the population effect and public health. But they should consult experts. And that is why we were gathered here. 4 experts, and myself and Ricardo have so many studies. Probably there's no one else with so many studies as we two have. Unfortunately, we were not asked to provide any kind of evidence, and as you saw, we provided evidence here. We didn't provide just an opinion. We didn't just share our own views. We showed what's the current situation in terms of relative risk, in terms of use by the population. So all the concerns that the WHO has raised, which are legitimate, there are answers, however, about what is happening now with all these concerns. And all these concerns, as I said, are justifiable for the future, but since all the evidence shows that these concerns are not happening in reality today, there is no reason to implement any restrictions or bans.
If you want to see more videos about our trip to India, then please subscribe to the Rebel Media by hitting the button below.